Okay, our next task is to notify the user when something has gone wrong, because we're not going to expect them to have their Chrome developer tools open, and if I try to log in with a bad password, well, it just appears that nothing is happening. But there is something happening. There's errors being reported into our console, but we want to surface those errors to the user. One way we could do this is to add a toast library to our application. And the one that I'm going to take a look at and install is called NGX Toaster. And if we take a look at the NPM package and also their documentation as well, then we can check which version it's currently supported for. And if we do take a look at the dependencies and the latest version available for each version of Angular, do be aware of this and take a look. And if you're on an earlier version of Angular, then please do pick the appropriate, or later version of Angular of course, then please do come in here and pick the appropriate version for your version of Angular. Now I know for sure I'm on version 17 and version 18 is just around the corner, and that's why I want to point out whether or not this is compatible yet. If I do take a look at the GitHub repository for this, then we can take a look at the sort of timelines of how long it took them to release an update for Angular 17. The fact this was 6 months ago and it was their upgrade to Angular 17 suggests they're pretty on the ball when it comes to updating this for the latest version of Angular, because a new version of Angular comes around every 6 months. The fact this was updated for Angular 17 about 6 months ago suggests it probably is going to be pretty quick for Angular 18 as well, although I can't guarantee that. And if we take a look at its functionality, then it does what you'd expect a toasting service to do. If I open a toast, we see a toast. Perfect. So that's what we're going to go ahead and install into our application. And installing it is pretty straightforward. We need NGX Toaster. We also need Angular animations, but we already have that provided and available in our application. And we also need to provide its CSS as well, which we get from Node modules. Okay, so this documentation tells us everything we need to do. So let's start off by adding the installation for this to our application. And I'll open up the terminal once again, and I'll just use this tab to go ahead and install NGX Toaster. And shouldn't be any problems because this version is compatible with the version of Angular that I'm using. And since this has been updated for Angular 17, then when it comes to setup, it's pretty straightforward. And they also have the provider for the standalone way of creating Angular components. So we can provide the toaster. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll go to our app.config, and just below the animations, I'm going to say provide toaster. And we get the automatic imports as well. What a wonderful package. Everything just seems to work. And inside the toaster, the provide toaster, we can also provide this with some configuration. And for this app, I'd prefer the toasts to be on the bottom right of the screen. So I'm going to say the position class and specify toast dash bottom dash right. And one more thing we need to do, we just need to add the CSS for this into our application as well. And I'm just going to copy their link to the Node modules NGX Toaster and toaster.css. And I'll head back to the application, we'll go to the angular.json to configure this. And inside our styles array, then we also need to add this and add the comma as well. So far so good, and let's go ahead and use this in our nav component. So if we do get an error logging in, we don't silently fail or just log out to the console. And the toaster provides a toaster service. So I'm going to say private toaster equals inject, and we can inject the toaster service that we get from NGX Toaster, like so. And I'm going to say that if we get an error, I'm going to say list.toaster.error, And our error comes back as an object. We've seen this earlier, but the error is the surrounding object, and our message is contained inside a property called error. So we effectively need to say that we want to get the error.error to see the actual error message that we're going to display to the user. And if we take a look at this and we go back to our application, and let's just type in some nonsense as the username and password, and if I click login, then I see the toast over on the left hand side, but what we do need to do whenever we add something to our angular.json is to restart our client application. It doesn't get applied until we do restart the Angular app. But now I've restarted it, let's go back and give that another go. Once again, I'll just type in some nonsense, and what we should see is the toast appearing in the bottom right to say invalid username. And if I put in a correct username, but an invalid password, then I'm going to see the invalid password. Excellent. And if we go to our register component, let's also configure the same thing inside there. And the register component.ts. And if we have an error, then let's also do the same inside here. But first of all, we need to inject the toaster service. So I'll say private toaster equals inject and add the toaster service. And then if we get an error, we'll say list.toaster.error, and we'll just say error.error. And okay. And that should work. Well, it's not really going to work. I'll explain why soon. But if I register a new user and I don't put anything in the username and password, we haven't dealt with validation yet, so we're going to be allowed to do this. And if I click on register, I see what looks like a strange response. But our toasts can only take strings and display strings. They can't display the contents of objects. And our validation errors come back as an object when we don't supply a username and password. So don't worry about seeing that. We do have a section on error handling coming up, and we're going to deal with this situation during that section. So don't worry about seeing objects.object or object-object. If you do something that manages to generate that toast, then we are logging things out to the console. And we've also got our Chrome developer tools to get more information about what the problem is. In fact, I don't think we do have a log out to the console for this one. But that's not a problem, because what we also have is our network developer tools inside Chrome as well. So we get the failing request and we see object. We want to know what the problem is. Then we just click on the network request. That takes us to the Network tab in Chrome Developer Tools. Then we know that we can click on the network request, and then we can take a good old look at the response. We can see the preview of what we're getting back. We can see the headers. We can see the payload. What we sent up was nothing, hence the reason we got the error. And in the preview, we can see all of the different errors that are coming back from the server. And in this case, it's just validation errors where we're missing the username and password. But now we have toasts, and that was very easy to set up and configure. And what we're going to take a look at next is, because currently we don't have any client-side protection for our routes, and anonymous users, if they were sneaky, then they could type into the URL /members, and then they can see the secret text that only authenticated users should be able to see. And we're going to take a look at how we can prevent that kind of behavior with auth guards next.